welcome to Unifying Force. I'm Kat, Dave, Geo, episode 68. How's everybody doing today?
Doing super well. Kat is with us, people. You can hear the disembodied voice. No, she is not a cat, but she is with us in audio only at the moment.
So the graphics on this show aren't intelligent enough to put up avatars.
Yeah, for whatever reason, StreamYard goes sideways.
No, it's not StreamYards. I do the same thing on many StreamYards tables, no problem whatsoever. It's the graphics that the Unifying Force graphics are not allowing it.
Oh.
I think it's because it's there. It's just the Starfield overlay is probably covering it for some reason, because one's like, oh, it's a text that the camera's not on, so it's overlaying the graphic instead of the camera. Because
let's see if I can fix that. Oh no, it just gives us black.
Yeah, I
don't know. Okay. It's not StreamYard, it's me.
It's the Force is what it is.
The will of the Force, yeah.
Yes.
The encroaching dark side, perhaps. Cat is,
welcome to episode 68. We are going to be talking about, and we know right off, this is a huge topic. This is crazy. But we're talking about the history of the Sith, okay? And we're doing that to get you ready, we hope, for the Acolyte. Because, I mean, at the beginning, let's talk about the Acolyte for a bit before we get into it. We were really promised when we saw the reveal for the Acolyte, however many years ago, that this was really kind of a Sith-centric that's what we were expecting. I don't know if I feel that way anymore. What do you guys think?
From the footage that we've seen, it doesn't seem to quite match that initial idea that I think was spread to all of us about it being entirely from the perspective of a dark side adept, someone, an acolyte, an apprentice, if you will, learning the ways of the dark side of the Force. It still seems centered on the Republic and from the Jedi's perspective, which is unusual and kind of the opposite to what the title might have suggested initially. So it is a bit surprising how different what it looks like we're getting is from the initial premise.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a Sith. I mean, granted, it's not necessarily Sith. They said, I believe they did use the word Sith, though, the first time they talked about the show. Now it's like, now it's like a dark side thing. But again, all the previews and stuff we've been seeing is very Jedi-centric. And Lucasfilm's usually good at making great trailers out of bad stuff. This is kind of the opposite, maybe, because the trailers aren't doing anything for me. And it's like, okay, a mystery, somebody's killing Jedi, they don't know who it is, it's some dark side person, but it still feels like a story you're telling from the Jedi perspective, whereas the whole appeal of the pitch is that let's tell a dark side story from the perspective of the dark side. And that doesn't seem to be what they ended up doing. Like, maybe that's what they intended when they started, and maybe there were differences at the, creative differences at Lucasfilm, and they changed it, but it doesn't feel like it is what they were initially saying it was going to be.
So, see, what I'm wondering, perhaps even hoping, is that they've rearranged this trailer and, maybe the Acolyte in name only wasn't garnering the response that they wanted. They weren't kind of getting the projected numbers of how it was going to be. And they've kind of done the trailer as a bait and switch. They're really pushing Carrie-Anne Moss because they know that Carrie-Anne Moss already has this built-in fan base to kind of bring the normies in. And that's what's upsetting the Star Wars fans who've seen all this Jedi stuff and who are like, yeah, okay, now we were promised something different. We want something different. Like I said, I maybe that's just me hoping, but I am hoping that maybe the trailer is kind of the bait and switch.
I really hope you're right. That would be awesome.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it would be great.
I've seen some stuff because the premiere happened this week in Hollywood, and there are a ton of people there. I've started to see some of the interviews on TikTok and Instagram, and that the director was really kind of looking at and wants to do kind of a martial arts film, martial arts show, and they're just putting that within the world of Star Wars. Now, I hope to goodness there's more to it than that, because if we're just seeing,
yeah, because that scene they previewed after the Phantom Menace screenings was a fight scene straight out of the Matrix, and I cringed to high heaven during the fight when Carrie-Anne Moss says, "Who trained you?" It feels like the most pandering to whiny fanboys who complained about lack of training. It's like that's all they're doing. It's like, stop. It's like, I never want to hear the word training again in a Star Wars movie. Just stop. It's not. It's like, you're going to preview a clip, but let's not dive into the interesting mythological aspects, the lore, which the fans were excited about. Let's say, okay, a fight scene, but who trained you? It's like, oh my, stop! I can't. It's like, I can't.
That's how the Force works. Training. We need not these things. That's how the Force works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not what's been there in the EU stuff and the elaborated stuff, but I mean, Luke was like the chosen one in like a week and a half, and that's like spent like battling a little remote on the Falcon, and why Han Solo would let him screw around with something that could potentially puncture the hull, and he's never held the thing. Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. We've got to modify our expectations a lot, given the kind of thing that our imaginations go to as Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
And from the, I guess, elevator pitch they kind of gave us with the Acolyte initially, to what it might be. It does seem like it's a different product overall, and I say product in the most literal and disappointing sense, because sometimes it does feel like it is commodified to push a certain amount of merch, a certain amount of extra investment in the Star Wars brand, and to get those dollars for Disney. And a lot of the time it can feel like it's at the expense of either very ardent fans, long time invested fans, those who've put in the hours to jump into the deep lore, which was huge when we had the expanded universe, which is now Legends. And it would be great to have another phrase that I really despise, but fan service, to be quite, loyal to the fan base that's been there for so long. And to see that kind of materialize in a Star Wars project would be great. But it does feel like this is being repositioned a couple of times, whether it's due to commercial reasons or due to, studio versus creator disagreements, to have been pivoted into what we see now, which is end of the High Republic era, going into the general Galactic Republic kind of setting, pre-Phantom Menace. The Jedi are everywhere. There is no sign of the dark side except this one mystery thing that's creeping in. And, there are flashes in the trailer that could be, sowing the seeds of what could be a dark side story. But I don't think we can hold our breath too much on that. I think it's going to be more, as you say, repositioned for general audiences, and maybe to get up some subscribers to Disney Plus. I don't know if it's going to work in that way at all, but sometimes these shows can work on word of mouth or hit better after the fact, not upon initial release, but begins to gain some traction afterwards. So maybe that's something they're looking at. I don't know. It's really hard to imagine what goes on in Disney exec heads nowadays, other than here's a board, here's the direction towards the money that we want. Get us there.
I mean, that's really the kind of thing, and I think you hit a lot of it on the head. Is it's become a product to put out there, and it's not, and it kind of always was, or it became always was, because I mean, George made the vast majority of the money on the first movies from retaining the rights to the merch, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if people know that or not. If people watch this show, they should have. We've discussed that before, but that's where George made up the money. Is he lost a lot of the rights to the story and the film itself, and just to get it made, and he kept the rights to what nobody wanted at the time. That's one of the innovative things about Star Wars, is the merchandising and the toys and the things that, you know, we keep umpteen bazillion years after just on our desk, and still collect the ones that we didn't have as children. But this is one that's leaning that way. They released Black Series figures before the show's out. That hasn't happened in a while. You know, we didn't get Kenobi figures till after the Kenobi show. We didn't get Mandalorian figures till much further down the line, because they were holding all that stuff so tight to the vest that we didn't want spoilers. But we have the first 4, 5, 6 maybe Acolyte figures are already have pre-orders and stuff have just gone up and been done for weeks, if not months. So don't know.
What could that say? That they have less faith in the product shipping during the show or afterwards?
So I don't know.
Strategy.
Because if you look back historically, you know, you go all the way back to the original trilogy, and you're like, well, they had to do. I keep a replica right there. They had to do the previous, you know, the original 12. They sent you out a piece of cardboard first, because they didn't have figures ready, you know.
Yeah. Quite
and people bought the crap out of that. It was just like, oh, cardboard, yeah.
It's the background to the figures.
Yes. Well, and it makes a lovely little display. I have it signed by the original artist of that. But the prequels, we totally got spoilers, because the prequel era, I was one of those people who's in Walmart at midnight, or, you know, in the middle of the night, because that's when they're stocking the figures ahead of the movie coming out. And just, I was not the only one there. Let's just say it that way. It's like, as soon as that stuff hits the floor, before it's, you know, it's on. If you waited to come in the next day, I mean, you got nothing. So I don't know. I don't know if it's lack of faith in this, if it's something, another tool to gain interest in the show, is going ahead and putting something out there ahead of time. I don't know. There's lots of ways you could look at it.
Yeah, I think the one sign, I think, of the wider implications for a new Star Wars project to be considered in higher regard is when they come out with, I think, supplementary reading material. So the best recent example I can think of with that is with Star Wars Visions Season 1, Volume 1. We had an entire novel come out of the very first episode, which is a massive sign that there's a lot of faith and trust in the project, and also a lot of believability from the people who pull the strings commercially and executively behind everything, saying, okay, let's put out a novel about a character that's completely new in a completely alternate slant of Star Wars itself, but give, you know, one established writer a chance to create a novel of high fantasy fiction, sci-fi, Star Wars. I think that's a great sign that people are anticipating either a wider ranging impact or they're putting an emphasis on the story. So I don't know what Lucasfilm are thinking about in terms of publishing or where they are with some of the comic series. Are they going to consider graphic novels in this timeline? Because, of course, the huge project before, chronologically, in the current Star Wars timeline, before the Acolyte, is the High Republic, which has been doing fantastically well and has a lot of people invested in the plethora of characters and events and complicated relationships going on between those characters. And I do wish maybe that the Acolyte was taking more inspiration from that period. It is right in the timeline preceding it. And I'm not completely up to date at all with the goings on the High Republic and the latest phases at all, but I can see just from afar how intricate and detailed the storytelling has been. And if that kind of approach, even even a tiny fraction of that would be in this sort of soup that will make up the dish that is the Acolyte, that would have been awesome, because I think there's a lot of connective tissue they could establish that would be new to some of us and familiar and comforting to those who've been reading along and filling in the gaps themselves. So I think
they're hitting a little bit of that market, because there is a character from the High Republic that is known and stuff who's going to overlap in this, because this it's after the High Republic or what they've shown us of the High Republic so far. Because the High Republic is hundreds of years before, BBY.
Yeah.
But so there's characters that overlap, but I don't think we haven't yet heard or seen that we're getting a lot of characters that overlap just because of this. But that's still, the High Republic is still, it's a different audience. It's not a small audience. There are a lot of people that we know, especially, who are all out, all into the High Republic and read everything. But it's still a subset of Star Wars fans, because you mentioned here the three of us who arguably are pretty big Star Wars fans know of it, read parts of it, pick and choose, have learned this and that, but aren't up to date on the full thing because it is so massive, the High Republic. But if any of that shows up, but that's not what you're going to do to get the normies. That's not what you're going to get general audiences, because people are not there on that, despite the fact that the High Republic has adult novels, young adult novels, and novels, not even novels, like stories for children. It's got, and comics and everything it has. So I don't know. I am extraordinarily interested to see it. I am waiting, not so patiently at this point, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I think it's a race to put out product, because again, it's also a side effect of the whole Bob Chapek era of quantity over quality, and trying to get merchandise around it. But is it going to have staying power? It kind of depends. Like Gio mentioned, the fact that one of those Visions thing had a book, that showed actual passion there, and Lucasfilm believed in that. But this, I'm not really sure. It feels like it's just content, even though it has ties to High Republic, which is, I've already heard, is just an excessive amount of titles that it's really hard to get into or catch up if you weren't on it from the get-go. It's like it's too unreasonably huge. And so it's like, okay, you'll have tie-ins, but that's going to mean something to the few people who've read it. But, to most of the people, it's not going to really matter.
So let me speak to that for a minute, because I tried to go all into the High Republic when it started. I read the first 3 or 4 adults. Actually, I got confused in the fact of what were the young adult books and which were the adult books. So I read the first 3 or 4, and I think it was a mix of adult and young adult books. and tried to stay current with the comics through the first series, and no, no, I don't have that much free time. But I do think that you don't have to do that. I think that you can pick up on a story here or a story there, and if you have read some of them without the others, I think you'd be all right. Like if you just want to go out and you read the first High Republic novel, it was a great story in and of itself, and you wouldn't have to do anything else. If you just read that, you get an introduction to the new bad guys, you get an introduction to some of the new good guys, and what's going on in the universe, and okay, it's a good story. I recommend going and grabbing that. If you want to pick up some comics, if you're more of a comic person, that first series of comics, and not even having to go and collect the entire series, because they were telling breakup stories, like it's four or five issues of this is this story, and 4 or 5 issues it's talking about this. Now they do interconnect, and you could get them all, but pick up a section, pick up a part of that. I think even they may have, and watch our sister show on the other alternate Sundays, the Jedi Archives. They talk all about this, and they know way more than I do about it. I think they've been collected at this point. So you could not have to get the individual comics. You could get a collection of, these are the stories from this section of it. Read that. So stuff is out there. You can get into parts of it, pieces of it. I liken it a little bit to the old EU, because that was vast and huge. And, some of us read the Thrawn stuff. Some of us read, what was the Rogue Squadron, the X-Wing stuff. Yeah. And some of it, we didn't read, no one tried to read the entire EU.
Yeah.
Except maybe Skip. But
yeah, you could pick and choose. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think you can do the same here. And like I said, I hope some of that picking and choosing and seeing what you have is from the Acolyte. It is, you can get to, or maybe the Acolyte gets you interested in what this is referring to, and you go grab that book and you go, oh, and it increases your knowledge, your enjoyment of it. But okay, let's get into what this story is really about, the history of the Sith. So if this is going to be about the Sith, we already know, okay, it's Phantom Menace's anniversary. We watched that on the watch along. They clearly say, they're like, what was that thing? I think that might have been a Sith. We haven't seen a Sith in like a millennia or something. Wait. The Acolyte about the Sith is supposed to only happen a couple of 100 years before. What? So, yeah. So is the Acolyte gonna completely and totally retcon what's going on? So either answer that question or pick me up on the history of the Sith as you know it, either and or. Go.
So I think they've stated it's 100 years before the saga begins, so before the Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's 100 years after the High Republic, basically, and
so yeah, there could still be some overlap of characters, as you mentioned. There are some Jedi that will have been alive and kicking throughout the High Republic and the Acolyte era into the main saga. Yoda. So, and you'll also have characters that because of their species can last, such as Wookiees. I think everyone's excited at the idea of a live-action Wookiee Jedi, which I understand could be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Let's hope it's not the only reason to be excited about some of the characters in the Acolyte, but I think it's going to have to almost, to fit in with the current continuity of Star Wars, it's going to be a case of all these characters that we see who witness anything dark side or anything with a red lightsaber have to be at risk of being completely off the scene by the time of the Phantom Menace, which means that really there should be just a massacre of Jedi by the end of the Acolyte, or wherever the Acolyte story ends, because you just cannot have any characters hanging around even remotely suspecting something of Sith-like origin going on, going into the saga. So it almost feels like they've written themselves into a really weird corner that they didn't have to.
Well, one thing I think that we might like is Yoda can't know about anything that's like, so Yoda, they gotta like put Yoda in a box somewhere. So, and that's not necessarily bad that we don't need to see Yoda in the Acolyte. You know, let this story be different. That's a good reason why he doesn't know anything about it. Okay.
Yeah, that fits.
I'm fine with that. But I don't know. I still don't understand how, like, the archives could be incomplete. What? If it's not in the archives, it doesn't exist.
Well, it's like in the Phantom Menace, they had the inconsistency that they don't explain, which is, they've been extinct for a millennium, and at the end of the movie, there's always two of them. And it's like, well, is that... So the only logical interpretation at the time was, well, now that we realize they're back, then there only ever were two at any time. Well, that's what we know about them, so there must be two of them. But then Clone Wars comes along and validates the whole Darth Bane story. So, no, there weren't just two of them. So then they try to explain it and say that, even though they thought the Sith were gone, there were these rumors of the rule of two being a thing, and they weren't really sure if it was true or not.
Yeah.
And it stands to reason that the Jedi in this show may not realize that these people are actually Sith. They might think, okay, so you're skilled, but does that make you a Sith? Like in Phantom Menace, there's another inconsistency that, despite everything Qui-Gon told the Council, like, well, we're not sure if this is a Sith. Well, why is it at the end of the movie that just because Darth Maul killed Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan killed Maul, that, he must have been a Sith then? Like, he never told you his name was Darth. They never did. It's like,
right.
It's like there's no logical reason for them to suddenly say, I guess he was right after all. It's just kind of...
Well, I guess it's the level
he had the robe and color lightsaber, so it must be...
Well, yeah, is they don't trust that it must be a Sith. He's using a red lightsaber. It is apparently, other than General Grievous, nobody just like picked up loose random lightsabers that goodness knows Obi-Wan and Anakin lost enough of those. Nobody just like picks them up and uses them. We wait till Han, I think, is the only, other than Grievous, Han is the only non-force wielder to just pick up and use a lightsaber. Well, then you get Finn, who that's debatable. We don't even know. Don't even start that now. But so here's the history of the Sith in canon, okay, as I understand it. So the Sith, millennia ago, I think it's even stated somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5,000 BBY, is that it was a rogue Jedi, right? It started off who broke away, who wanted to study and more the dark side of the Force, who was convinced that dark side would lead them to be more powerful. Oh, see, there's allusions to that in the original trilogy. It's like, is it more powerful? No. More seductive? Yes. Is
quicker, easier? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they wanted to gain that more power, and that happened for thousands and thousands of years. You've got the Sith, and then but were there two rule of two at that point? No. Is the rule of two was interpreted, not till Darth Bane, I believe, is that there was a huge war between the Jedi and the Sith, and then infighting amongst the Sith as well, because we've seen that happens is in especially we see that in like Clone Wars and how Darth Sidious and Maul and pitting them against Tyrannus and then even pitting Anakin against Tyrannus. So with that war there were only two. And that's why Darth Bane allegedly instituted the rule of two. I think it's some of that infighting. And again, Sidious alludes to that in the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, is there's a reason why there can only be two, because they're constantly killing each other for more power.
Yeah.
So, but I still don't get that. Okay, and I'm getting some of this information from, the be all end all information of the Star Wars, which is the Wikipedia, is they're saying that the Sith just chose to remain in hiding. They remained in hiding for a millennium until the rise of Sidious and Maul in 32 BBY. And when they chose to reveal themselves to the Jedi. And Maul obviously knew about this rule, and that we're in hiding because of saying that, as we choose to reveal ourselves. But then, and Palpatine is Sidious, so he's hiding in plain sight. He's going for political power while he's going for unlimited power behind the scenes. It really, some of the things out of context really do seem a little cheesy. But yeah, and then the Jedi just basically ignore this. They think, oh, yep, they're all gone.
Yeah, it does. Seems like a lot of assumptions were made at the wrong time by the wrong people. It is interesting. I was going and looking at the I guess the most official story group approved resource now,
Yeah.
I think, which would be on StarWars.com, the databank itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so the definition of the Sith there is it's kind of what you expect from if you just watched, let's say, the original 6 films, and what you'd gather. It's nothing heavy in terms of lore. It's genuinely just says an ancient order of Force wielders. They're devoted to the dark side. They practice hate and deception and greed. And they're noted for their red-bladed lightsabers, their black dress, and their use of aggressive feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So the three that I guess Darth Maul definitely embodied, but didn't officially say. And they look to amass power at all costs. And the example it gives is just the most clear example in the films, which is the evil Darth Sidious, along with his apprentice Darth Vader, achieved the Sith goal of galactic conquest after a millennia of plotting. So it does fit in with the wider storytelling that was in the expanded universe and that we got from the Darth Bane stories. That was set exactly 1,000 years before the events of the Star Wars saga itself. So before the Phantom Menace. Fits in, loosely speaking, with the idea of Sith being vanished for a millennia, which I think is one of the lines in the Phantom Menace. But then you go to if you try and dive a bit deeper on the databank and find the history of the Sith, it does just say, exactly as you're saying, the Sith remained a distant memory until the rise of Darth Sidious and his apprentice Darth Maul. So it's as if they're deliberately keeping a vagueness to the history of the Sith, and maybe they're even unsure of at what point they're going to use different parts of the storytelling, different parts of those characters. I remember when we were experiencing the Clone Wars live as it was being released to us, that it was devastating when the Clone Wars was cancelled as a big move when Disney were acquiring the license. But they put out the Lost Missions, the kind of sort of season 6 of the Clone Wars.
Mm.
And that had a lot of good dark side and the Force lore, including Darth Bane being recanonized. So us actually seeing the the ghost of Darth Bane having a conversation with Yoda, which is very surreal, especially if it's a character you've only heard of vaguely, or you might have, read the novels of before. But that was great in that it seemed like they were acknowledging some of the massive amounts of storytelling and some of these fan favorite characters that were in this much wider history that they could bring into line and into the main story. And that fitted perfectly. It was a case of Yoda was traveling to the homeworld of the Sith, the origin of the dark side. He's being guided by these four spirits. And who is he confronted with? Well, maybe one of the most iconic Sith who created the Ruler 2 and who kept them in secret for 1,000 years until the grand plan for revenge came about in the Phantom Menace onwards. So it's like we go back and forth thinking, what are these execs doing? But at some point, sometimes they've made a really good decision and thought, let's, do the old pick and mix, find some of the best things that were in the EU and bring it in where it's relevant into current Star Wars. So there is a chance for the Acolyte to do these sorts of things. From how we talk about it, it doesn't sound like we have much hope, but there are opportunities there.
There's so more. Is we're talking and we're treading the line between what is currently canon and what is Legends, and we've seen that the new Disney shows can completely pick and choose what they want from both. We've brought the elements that you wanted to bring of Thrawn from the EU. We've brought some Night Sister magic and things from things that were on the fringes of canon and into what is the mainstream. It will be extremely interesting to see what the Acolyte chooses to use. Is in Legends, you go back, and if you ever want to really, really dive deep on this, look at the StarWars.com, look at the archives there, look at Wikipedia, and the Legends page for the Sith, scroll, massive. So it's talking about how the term Sith originally refers to a race of people. It's a race of people on the planet that those dark Jedi, and it refers to, and I think the EU refers to Sith and dark side force wielders for a lot as dark Jedi. But the term Sith becomes after those dark Jedi start warring with the Jedi who are the light side force users, they're obviously banished. You're not allowed to just hang out here and cause problems and wars anymore. So once they move to the Sith homeworld, the homeworld of these race of beings, they have no choice, and over time, those people were enslaved to be used, but after a while they become intermingled with the expelled Jedi or the dark Jedi, and they start they become one. Okay, it becomes like one people. It was no longer a master slave apprentice race, although we see weirdness in the end in the Rise of Skywalker that I don't know how to interpret. You know what I'm saying? All those Sith, the vast I don't know
the shadowy cultists in the
exactly
Roman amphitheater. Yeah.
So are they I don't know. But so
I don't think they know either.
Yeah. Sith really became one and the same. It was no longer a race, it was more of a creed and a religion. Kind of like Mandalorians. Mandalorian is a creed, Mandalorian is not a race. Anyone who walks the way. I interpret Sith as kind of the same kind of thing. You become Sith if you walk the way. And do you have to be the force sensitive red lightsaber wielding? Maybe, to be an official Sith. This is where the Rule of Two gets funny. There are plenty of people who are Sith adjacent, maybe. Let's kind of say that all of those cultists and people who are following the cult of the Sith. I think that's how, after the Rule of Two, after Vader and Sidious were destroyed, that the Sith stuck around. You know, so there's much more out there. And it talks about in the EU how the Sith has changed, and this is like reality in anything else. Anytime there's a new leader, when Darth Bane becomes the leader, when Darth Sidious becomes the leader, they like reorganize the thing and they make it work for them, you know. So there's just so much more out there, and it will be extremely interesting to see what the Acolyte draws on. I think even there's one in here that I'm scrolling through that I hadn't read before, is the Rule of One. You know, wisely, Darth Krayt has undone the mistake of Bane. Therefore, the Rule of Two limits the one Sith today. So now it's, you know, one Sith after the class, which sounds like a good plan, since, you know, Darth Sidious decides to, you know, off his master in his sleep, apparently.
Yeah, there's a lot of evolution of the term, isn't there, from where it started to where it goes. You see that with everything, with the history of, like you're saying, of leadership, the way like a community form and change over time, the way words change over time, their meaning can intermingle with other things. Then you'll get synonyms, and you'll get the evolution of words as etymology, that the source of it becomes less relevant to its use today. There's such a gigantic backstory of the Sith if you have the EU legends that you're wanting to learn about and you're wanting to read about. It goes it goes all the way back to the beginnings of the history of the galaxy, you know, almost 25,000 years before the Star Wars saga. There's such a huge timeline where you first have the Jedi emerging. And this is something we discussed in one of our really early episodes about the origins of the Force. Once you had the establishment of a group practicing this sort of magical energy field that they could feel in commune with, there was going to be an offshoot. There was going to be a confrontation between how people decide best to use it. Imagine it was almost like a resource, something valuable that, you know, the first explorers found, and then there comes across a dispute that ends up becoming a war on how best to use the resource, who is able to access it, how can it be spread if we want it to go elsewhere. Do we keep it selfishly for ourselves? Do we tempt others and build a craving and a lust for it? And it's in that kind of latter description that the Dark Jedi emerged as a splinter and wanted to investigate this resource, the Force, the energy field that surrounds everything that they have a connection to, in an exploitative manner, to further their own agenda or to insulate themselves from other things.
This is the Star Wars fan like fiction that you need to write, because the way you're describing this just sounds so much like the Force as like an allegory for the use of petroleum products. This is when someone discovers oil.
When I said resources, oil was one of the many that went through my mind. Yeah.
It's like, wait,
you got me. Yeah, or the gold rush or something. Yeah. But there is a kind of precedent for that, and it's been established by there's literally dozens of authors that have helped create this timeline that was so rich in storytelling and so big. And you had just a divergence of use in the Force, and you had the Dark Jedi who were at some point defeated and exiled. They came across the world Korriban, which is the original Sith homeworld, and how it was known for many years in Star Wars fandom because of the EU.
Which is where the Sith species, which if you get really deep, there were like, I think, 3 different subspecies of Sith living on that world. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So they had the kind of native people were this sort of red-skinned, slightly reptilian humanoid species called the Sith. And the Dark Jedi that landed there thought, we need to start amassing power. We've got the resources that we need. Let's exploit the people. So, they were colonizing the Sith homeworld. And what they decided is once they found it was written in the EU that the Sith had a connection to the Force that was a lot higher than most living things. And at this point, it wasn't even sure whether everything living was connected to the Force or not. And that's kind of become a story that's developed, and George Lucas has had more to weigh in on that with Dave Filoni through the saga as it's developed in the Clone Wars and beyond. But at this point, it was looked at as this one species had a high affinity with the Force. And so the Dark Jedi thought, well, let's teach them our ways and let's have them be our servants. They were indentured then to the Dark Jedi, who then took the title as Lords of the Sith. So they were genuinely the people who reigned over this species of humanoid people. And that's where the term Dark Lord of the Sith came from, because their origin...
literally like from, what's the word? Is Sithari?
Possibly, yeah.
I think there was a term in there that was
the apostrophe ARI.
Yeah,
I think is meant to mean Lord in the Sith native language, which might have a term that I don't remember at the moment. But there are these elements that are then kind of kept. You've got the Dark Lord of the Sith title being used pretty much in canon by any time there's the one main Sith in charge. The master and the apprentice, and that's where it came from. But what I also find interesting is that I remember coming across the original novels that were published for the original trilogy, so Star Wars, before it was even rebranded A New Hope. I had this little old omnibus that I came across, and it was just very nondescript. It was black. It had Star Wars written in the kind of font that you've got the opening crawl rather than Star Wars itself. And in that, it was really interesting in that the novelization that was attributed to George Lucas did describe Darth Vader as Dark Lord of the Sith. That genuine phrase was there. And this was in a novel from the 70s. So it's kind of always been there in the background. But it's nice how the format of the old expanded universe allowed lots of authors to kind of legitimize and codify a title or a thing in Star Wars. And then because there seemed to be this understanding between all these different authors, whether it was graphic novels, short stories, big adult fiction novels, they could use these ideas and keep them kind of in line. And I think it is incredible how over a sort of 20, 30-year period, Star Wars evolved so much in printed word. And
it evolved
relatively
much, like,
consistent.
in the darkness, in hiding. It was really for the longest period for like the nerds only. You had to be like the nerdiest of the nerd to be the expert on all, because we've talked about earlier that how vast it was, all of these extra books and things.
Yeah, there is so much. There's so many, and you look at the ideas that George Lucas was influenced by to make the Jedi. You could say the samurai aspect, the Old West feel, the idea of Shaolin Monastery, the idea of the Tao and Yin and Yang, of like Indic mythology and ancient Greek mythology, and all these ideas, and then they get sort of diluted and distilled by Joseph Campbell, and that's where he takes a lot of inspiration from to create the idea of the Jedi, this kind of peaceful order. And then with that, you're going to need antagonists who are kind of a similar power level. So it's almost inevitable that you've got something on the other side.
And the fact that they essentially came from, they were an offshoot of this group. It's a divergence in the Force, literally. It's a divergence in the Jedi. And you can find more information again, boom, right here. Star Wars
ultimate
Book of the
resource.
Sith. I haven't had a chance to crack this open. It came in late, but this is available now in a 4-part set: the Jedi Path, Bounty Hunters, and the Imperial Handbook. All of these nice, illustrious hardcovers for not very much.
How much was it?
The $40
Where?
for all of those together, and it
Where?
came Amazon.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And this deals in the rule of 2. It's nicely illustrated. All sorts of greatness. And each one of these books, the literal pages have a different feel to them. The Imperial one has like black line. The outside of the exterior of the pages are black. And it's weakness. It's talking about all of this. I am extremely excited to read this, and really, how nice the set is. I almost want to buy another set just to like leave sealed and put on a shelf. But I can see now how much that I'm going to read this, and the illustration I love here. We've got illustrations pulled directly from animated content that you'll have. It's got the stuff from the live action as well.
Now another thing, I know Darth Bane was supposed to get name dropped in Phantom Menace, and then George changed his mind because he didn't think he needed excessive backstory at the time.
Right.
But it would have clarified
Wow.
what Yoda and Mace Windu meant when they acknowledged the rule of 2 at the end of the movie, despite the fact that they said they've been extinct for millennium.
Right, so they knew. No, that fits.
So, I mean, I don't think here's unpopular opinion from Dave today, that the fact that what is considered canon and what is considered history and the fact that there are these inconsistencies in the story of Star Wars, I don't think it takes me out of the story. I don't think it's unrealistic. I think the current accepted definition of the history of the world changes depending upon who is telling it, what point of view, where you are centered. Is the history that I have learned in especially the southern United States is different than history that other people have learned throughout other places in the US, history that you would have learned in the UK, history that you would have learned in other parts of the world. That's just, if this happens in any story that's told in any historical account, it's from a certain point of view. And us as Star Wars fans, I think learning about these different points of view and reconciling that the truth probably lies somewhere in between. It's what, okay, my soapbox for a minute. It's what you should be doing. You as a human being on the planet should be doing anytime you are looking for what happened in an event. Is if you're getting your news from news sources, is don't just trust the one because they will have a political slant. Is look at your news from a multitude of different sources and figure out what actually happened. Is
Always.
That, I think, can be interpreted as the same in Star Wars. And I know there are people that are going to go, dude, this is not reality. It's like here's the story and that's what. But is it not? They're creating not only just a story. Yes, it was a story at a point when A New Hope came out, or when Star Wars, as it really was, when Star Wars came out, yeah, that's the story. This is what happened, A to B. Mm-hmm. But it's not a story anymore. It's an entire universe. It's made out of it's. You have to see George Lucas's work. You have to see Dave Filoni's work. You have to see Jon Favreau's work. You have to see the work of Timothy Zahn and the work of Claudia Gray and the work of all of these creators to know what's going on in the universe.
Speaking of which, George Lucas was in Cannes this week because he got an honorary Palme d'Or, and he was interviewed about Star Wars, and he says that in the post-Disney era, or in the Disney era rather,
Right.
that they don't really seem to have a grasp on what the Force actually is. He's like, he gets it. A lot of the other ones don't. They're trying to rewrite the world or don't really get it. And he's like, yeah, you know, corporate IPs and that kind of thing. And like, I wanted him to elaborate on how he would define the Force.
Yeah.
The last significant contribution relating to the Force that he made was the Mortis trilogy. And how he thought of all these interesting things, and he didn't want them to answer any of the questions. And it's like, well, I would have loved to hear that guy continue to espouse some of those ideas.
Because really, it looks like in what we're going to see Ahsoka season 2, they're going to start giving us dead solid answers to that. You know,
but do we want them?
I don't know.
Or does that take away the mysticism?
I don't know. But then Filoni has literally like taken us to Mortis before in the Clone Wars and still managed to keep it nebulous and vague and
he did. Yeah.
So it could be
Absolutely
done again in live action and done that way. It's here's the thing that the Acolyte could do again is there could be a Sith Acolyte, an apprentice happening. Can you keep that hidden? That could be part of the story, is how that's hidden is, and every one of the Jedi that has knowledge of it could, you know, so it doesn't get out there. The story could be explained in such a way that it will allow for it. We just kind of have to wait and see.
Yeah, it could fit. I think it would almost make sense if all the characters that we see end up the way the Rogue One ensemble did.
Rogue One them! Rogue One them all!
Rogue One them all. Make the call that you need to.
Well, yeah. And I don't know. That was one of my disappointments in the Bad Batch is, they should have Rogue One those dudes.
Oh, wow, yeah. It was too sweet a fairy tale ending.
But it does allow us. It's a love-hate thing. Is I love how the Star Wars in general leaves a lot of things untold that could be come back to later and deepen it. And sometimes I hate it that they do that because how they come back to it and tell us what happened and beat us over the head with it. Sometimes I'm like, oh no. But anyway,
you should have left it. Finish on a high or a very low, but a memorable one.
But yeah, here's the great thing about stuff coming out. We've got the Acolyte coming out. We're allegedly going to it's starting to get more real about getting the Skeleton Crew later this year. More Star Wars stories. And if you want to know what's going on with them and you want to see interpretations, or you haven't read all of that EU stuff or the High Republic and you don't understand, here's your source right here on the Virtual Cantina Network, because we are going to have watch-alongs for all the episodes of The Acolyte. We will also have our brothers from our sister show, John, Mike, and Bryce, are going to do the Acolyte after show. So they're going to do, after we've done that watch along, they're going to do deep dives. And those are the guys to explain to you the High Republic stuff and where the tie-ins lie. Because if you want to know people who have read each and every little bitty bit of that, every novel, every young adult, like Mike is getting the kids' picture books at this point and deep diving through them. So Yeah, that information will be out there. We are here to help you with understanding the obscure references that are out there. So just keep tuning in to the Virtual Cantina Network while you are hopefully enjoying the Acolyte show that is coming so soon. So soon. What are we at? 2 weeks now? Less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dropping June the 6th. I don't know.
No, June 4th.
June
4th.
4th.
Okay. So, yeah.
10 days.
Super coming soon.
Yeah. Do we know how many episodes it's supposed to be?
I haven't paid attention to that. I just assumed that it would probably be the 8 that the kind of Disney format has been so far.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a lot of episodes if they are, especially since they're dropping 2 at the beginning there.
Yeah, they are double bill opening. I wonder if IMDb's got it up because
That's what I was
tend
looking at
to.
right now.
Yeah, there's 8 scheduled on the IMDb calendar.
Yeah. So, but it'll be out there. We'll be here to talk about it, and I'm sure you will hear more on this topic. So until then, everybody, thank you for joining us again. We have had a lot of people watching. Surprising, I hope you guys noticed this is a live episode for a change. We're in here, and but thank you for joining us, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you. May the force be with you, guys.